From the Kansas City Sports Update Studios, welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead-update. Join Chris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, CastBox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead-update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom. How are we doing, Chiefs Kingdom? It is Wednesday, June 19th, and we are here to talk Chiefs. We have turned the show name from the Richard Smith Show into Kingdom Radio. We'd like to get the community more involved, and that just seems like the perfect fit and scenario for Chiefs Kingdom. And with me today, I have kris-Chavez, our senior NFL analyst, also some of the brains behind our transition to Kingdom Radio. How are we doing this morning, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic, bud. Yourself?
I couldn't be better. I'm really excited to get this, this underway. We've transitioned and switched gears, and we are now Kingdom Radio. Chris, what do you think of us transitioning to Kingdom Radio? I mean, that is a great fit in my mind. What do you think of it?
I think it's fantastic, man. Switching gears is going to really help to bring in more of the Kingdom community.
And that's exactly what we want here. We want to get everybody involved, and we want to spread as much knowledge of football and the Kansas City Chiefs to the community as we possibly can. That is our end goal. And I feel like every show or company should have your end goal and should have the community in mind. And look, we are Chiefs Kingdom, so we made this Kingdom Radio, and I love it, and I'm happy to get this underway. So on today's show, we got some different things that we're going to touch base on today in Chiefs Kingdom. And as perfect as the Kansas City Chiefs are, and I will say that, I will be the first one to say that we're about as near perfection as possible, and we have been for the last few years. But we have had our blunders in Chiefs Kingdom over the years. We've made some big mistakes and have some mishaps and have had some players on our team that we realistically wish we would have never known or heard of. So with that being said, our first segment is the biggest mistake in Kansas City Chiefs history. And with that, Chris, I'm going to let you jump right into that because there's a few different scenarios here, and I'm interested to hear your take. You always bring some good knowledge to the table and do your diligent digging. So please, Chris, fill us in on your take of the biggest mistake in Kansas City Chiefs history.
Well, unfortunately, there's quite a few that we could pick from. You could look at Giselle Jenkins.
Just stick to one.
I know, I got you. The one that I'm probably going to end up going with is going to be the 1983 draft and taking Todd-Blackledge. But I'll be even a little bit more specific because there's a lot of big-name quarterbacks that were drafted in that round or in the first round. And I'm going to say that we passed on Dan Marino.
Yes.
He's going to be passing on him is going to be, of all the quarterbacks that were available in that draft, that's the one that I really wish that we had taken. Looking at Blackledge's career in KC for 5 years, his best year, he played in 11 games, and his yards for that season was 1,700. His yards per game that season was 155, which, looking at Pat Mahomes last year, Mahomes didn't even sniff that. His lowest performance was 243 yards. I mean, granted, those are two very different eras in the passing game, but Blackledge was absolutely awful for us. And he really set the franchise back longer than his NFL career of 7 years.
Which I'm surprised it lasted that long.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was looking up his stats, and I was amazed to see that he got picked up by the Steelers for 2 more years.
I know, yeah, that's weird. They always seem to pull those reject quarterbacks out and, throw them in their depth. I have noticed that about Pittsburgh quite a few times. They are not scared to go out and pick up that horrible quarterback to throw in their in their depth.
Yeah.
But look, Todd-Blackledge, that was probably the biggest letdown as well. in Chiefs history. I mean, look, this is a situation, we're almost talking about a Ryan Leaf situation here with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I know that's a tough pill for Kansas City to swallow, and a lot of people don't remember this, but tell everybody how big a deal Todd Blackledge truly was coming out of high school like this. And Kansas City, we thought we had somebody. This wasn't just some guy that we picked up. It was one of those things that depth at in the quarterback position that year in college, I mean, it was stellar, but the past and the future proves to hold true with these quarterbacks. It's hit or miss.
So going into the 1983 draft, which kind of became known as the year of the quarterback, Todd Blackledge was considered one of the top prospects at the quarterback position. He was coming off of having won the Davey O'Brien Award, which is given to the nation's top quarterback. And the Chiefs ended up taking him with the 7th pick out of Penn State. And they thought that they got a freaking steal there. And they couldn't have been more wrong, man.
Right. Do you think it might have been the system that Blackledge came into, or do you think that we just all around obviously we didn't pick Marino. That was the ultimate number one pick that obviously everyone overlooked, and you look at his career and his stats, and it's pretty clear in my mind, the wrong choice. But did we even see that coming in Chiefs Kingdom? Did we expect Blackledge to outplay Marino? Was this one of those things that Marino came out of nowhere, or was he more like a Mahomes and people just passed on him, and then when the right team picks him up and goes to the right scenario, everybody puts their foot in their mouth or starts kicking themselves in the butt? Was that the scenario with Marino, or did we really feel like we had something with Blackledge?
To be perfectly honest, I can't really say or speak for the Kingdom at the time. I would venture to say that Marino was known as a gunslinger because he had always had a huge arm, and he was well known for having that big arm in Pittsburgh. But I think there were a lot of questions about his accuracy and coming out, and so there were questions about his mechanics and whatnot. And Blackledge was, given his success in college, he was seen more as the quote-unquote sure thing. When he came into the Chiefs, I would, and anytime that a player fails in the NFL, there's always one of two things going on. It's either the system that they went into, or it's their own personal psyche. And given that in 5 years in Kansas City, he then went to Pittsburgh and he couldn't get into more than any three games in any given season. Granted, it was only two. Tells me that it was more of the psyche issue with Blackledge as opposed to the system.
Now, in our system, was this a Bob Levy-led system for the Kansas City Chiefs? I'm trying to rack my mind as to who the coach was during that draft.
Oh, man. Let's see.
Because Bob Levy was with the Kansas City Chiefs as a head coach before he went to the Bills. But then before he was the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, I want to say that he was a coordinator of some kind. So I feel like he at least had his hands in on Todd Blackledge. Yeah,
but that was also the very first year that Carl Peterson was the GM in Kansas City.
Oh, okay.
And Peterson was, man, he was hit and miss.
Yes.
When it came to drafts.
Yes. Everything else, he was on key, but I'm telling you, I'm with you on that one. I love Carl Peterson to death, but he was not a draft guy.
Yeah. I can't put it on the coach because, on the flip side, you look at Andy Reid, and Andy Reid is all about adjusting his scheme to fit the player's skills.
Right.
And as any football fan knows, that is what you have to do, because then you're getting the most out of your players based on their skill level. You still want to coach them up so that they can do more things, but you need to adjust your scheme so that your players can be in their most successful positions.
Right, and Reed and a few coaches have honed in on that so much. It's one of those things that, look, you put Patrick Mahomes with a different front office, a different head coach, a different offensive coordinator, all of those things that people, all those issues, quote unquote, that Patrick Mahomes had as far as footwork and all that stuff and the combine and what all these teams were worried about, I don't feel like Patrick Mahomes would be as successful in another system as he is with Andy Reid, because Andy Reid is a don't fix what's not broke type of person. Mold what you have around that talent, like you were just saying. And so, do you think Patrick Mahomes would be as a dominant force under a different front office?
It would really depend on the scenario.
Right.
I mean, like, let's say, for instance, Mahomes goes to, I hate saying this, and I'm probably going to get ranged for this, but let's say that he goes to New England and with Belichick. Belichick is very much in the same vein as Reid as far as putting his players in the right scenarios to be successful.
Yes.
But then you also say, let's say that Mahomes goes to Jacksonville or to San Francisco, and the team is not built to be successful for a quarterback at this current point in time. They don't have the wide receiver depth. They barely have an offensive line. They're much more of a run now as opposed to pass now offense. And Mahomes would very much struggle in that offense because he doesn't have the weapons that he needs in order to open up the offense for him.
Right.
And so his development would take a little bit longer, whereas he came into the perfect system where we had already built our offense for Alex Smith. We had the weapons there for Alex Smith. We're coming off of a winning season with Alex Smith, but we knew that the writing was on the wall.
Yes.
And we had to prepare for life after Alex Smith, which a lot of teams don't do, and so they don't prepare for that next quarterback, and they don't build their offense for that next guy. And we went and we found somebody who can play like Alex Smith as far as mobility and reading the defenses, but he can step it up to a whole nother level because he has an arm strength that Alex Smith never, ever had going all the way back to college.
Right. And there's definitely some key fundamentals about, Patrick Mahomes that we've never seen before, and we wouldn't see it ever in Alex Smith, and we obviously would have never seen it in Todd Blackledge. And so where we're sitting right now, I mean, look, we finally got the franchise quarterback. And Chris, I'm really glad that you brought up Todd Blackledge, because this was a time point and an era in Kansas City. Look, Chiefs Kingdom was desperate for a quarterback in any direction when it came to Todd Blackledge. I mean, our franchise was in shambles. That was right after the Hank Stram era, and it just had got to a point in Chiefs Kingdom like it was like the Royals. We were stagnant for so long, and Todd Blackledge was not that answer.
Yeah, but we were going into it hoping that he would be, and just the letdown from him was just so awful.
Yes.
I mean, kind of like you had mentioned earlier, where it's kind of like that Ryan Leaf sort of drop. Like, you get so hyped up because you think that you got one of the best players in the draft, and then they end up to be a complete bust.
Yes.
And I mean, his first year, he only played in 4 games, his rookie year, and then the next 3, he played in 11, 12, and 10. And I mean, he didn't even start for an entire season.
That's a mental thing for sure. When you look at the progression of a starting quarterback who doesn't finish one season, that's a mental thing. And it's when you look at the progression of the NFL over the years and you see these busts, even outside the quarterback position, there's a lot of busts at the running back and wide receiver position too. But when you see those, you can it's almost plain as day. You can almost write it, in the sand that it's a mental psyche thing. When you're a Todd Blackledge and you're brought into the NFL and you're expected, you're not hoping. The Chiefs weren't hoping. They were expecting Todd Blackledge to be the next big thing and save a franchise that is so ass backwards. There's no way that Todd Blackledge could have ever saved that franchise where it was at that point. He couldn't have.
Yeah.
But so look, we're gonna move on to my biggest mistake here in Chiefs history. Todd Blackledge obviously is in the top 3. He might be number 1. But I've got an arguable point here for number 1. In Chiefs Kingdom, look, I'm going to bring up a name, and don't hate me for it, Chiefs Kingdom. Don't jump down my throat, because nobody ever loves to hear this name, ever, ever, ever. But the biggest mistake in Kansas City Chiefs history, in my mind, is in 1994. Let's skip up. Was it 10 years? In 1994, the Kansas City Chiefs signed a kicker by the name of Lynn Elliott, the guy who wore number 2, probably the most hated person in Kansas City Chiefs history. And I really don't even have to tell everybody why, because it only took one season for him to completely destroy his career, the Chiefs season, and destroy every single heart of every Chiefs fan ever. Lynn Elliott missed 3 field goals in the playoff loss at Arrowhead-Stadium to the Indianapolis Colts in the divisional game in the 1995 season, in a game that we lost 10-7. On a side note here, big time side note, Chiefs came to you guys realize that the Chiefs released Nick Lowry after the 1994 season due to salary cap issues. So, Chris, let me ask you this. What if the Kansas City Chiefs never released Nick Lowry and we never brought on Lynn Elliott? I know this is a what if and a hypothetical, and this obviously is not the result of what happened. But say we still had Nick Lowry on our team and not a Lynn Elliott. Do we win that playoff game?
Man, absolutely. I mean, Lowry was probably about as, I don't say necessarily like 100%, but he was as close to consistent as possible.
Yes.
And you give that guy 3 attempts at a field goal, well, he's going to hit 2 of those 3 for sure.
Absolutely.
And realistically, any kicker worth their weight in gold should be able to go out there and hit at least 1 of 3.
Especially in the divisional playoff game.
Yeah, and now granted, I've never suited up and played kicker, but I have a deep history in soccer. I've been playing for 30 years. Dude, I could go out there and I could launch at least 1 of those field goals. Right. And I mean, Lynn Elliott, dude, that's what you've done your entire career, and that's basically all you do in practice. You need to hit 1, man, just 1.
Yes.
And that playoff game goes totally different.
But here's my thing: is even if he would have hit 1, that would have sent us into overtime. And our offense was so dead that day. I didn't see us being able to drive down the field on the Colts that day. But you couldn't see the Colts driving down on the Chiefs. That was a very, very evenly matched game. And honestly, special teams was the biggest factor. That was the determining factor in this game. And obviously, the man named Lynn Elliott let us down.
Well, yeah, and I understand what you're saying as far as only hitting 1 would have sent us into overtime. Mm-hmm. But even if he hits that 1, mm-hmm. that then gives you the confidence, or gives him the confidence to step out there and say, you know what, I can hit another 1.
Right. Yes.
And I think that was kind of like at least in that game, that was the what got to him was the mind game.
Yep.
And his confidence just was shot.
Yes. Now let me ask you this. Say we go back to the scenario, we go back to the 3rd field goal that Lynn Elliott missed. I mean, this ended the game for us. If you were Marty Schottenheimer and you could turn back the hands of time, would you have went for it on fourth down after Lynn Elliott missed 2 field goals, and this was our last stab at advancing in the playoffs? Would you have gone for it, or would you have personally put Lynn Elliott back on the field?
Well, like you had said, man, our offense hadn't really been moving all that much. But given that Elliott had already missed 2 prior, I kind of have to go for it there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's one of the, so we put that in a scenario, that last Lynn Elliott field goal miss. Granted, yes, Lynn Elliott physically missed the field goal. You can't put it on anybody else. The laces were turned the right way. The hold was perfect. Now, is it Marty Schottenheimer's fault for putting that bum back on the field and putting it in his hands to advance us or tie the game to send us to overtime in the playoffs? Is that a Marty decision? That's Marty ball. Is that Marty, or what would you say?
Yeah, I kind of have to put that on Marty, because, I mean, ultimately, he makes the final decision.
Yes.
And I do put that on him, because he made that decision. He had the confidence in Elliott that Elliott obviously didn't have in himself.
Right.
And I think that all of those field goals actually probably helped to lead to the demoralization of our offense that game, because they didn't feel that why get it down the field and if we're just going to be missing these field goals. I mean, obviously their main goal is to get into the end zone, but man, the offense didn't even have that confidence in the kicker.
No, he was missing chip shots out there. These weren't even 50-yard field goals. These were 31-yard wide rights, 29-yard wide lefts. These were no-brainer field goals, and that's what drives me so crazy about Marty Schottenheimer letting him walk back out on the field. Honestly, you might as well put your punter out there to kick a field goal.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about it. So, look, Kansas City, we wanted to touch base on some of the bad notes in Chiefs history, because things are going so well right now. This is probably the best time to touch base on those things, because we won't think about it too much, and it doesn't burn us as much as it used to. And I know all of you, Lynn Elliott probably, burn a hole in your pocket or in your shirt or whatever for, the next decade after that happened. And it did me. I'm sure Chris as well. That was a huge deal in Chiefs Kingdom. But we're moving forward. We have a front office that is on key and a quarterback that is setting the tone for every quarterback in the future, for the future of the NFL. So let's move on to our next segment here. Let's move on to the no-look pass. And I love this. I love the no-look pass. This is a fun little game that me and Chris play. If you're new to the show or you're new to the no-look pass, me and Chris ask each other a question every single show to kind of catch each other off guard and get a real genuine sense of our football knowledge and how we feel about the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm going to start off the no-look pass today by asking Chris. Excuse me. This is also brought to you by Arrowhead-update. The no-look pass brought to you by Arrowhead-update. Chris, let me ask you this, and I know you know the answer to this, but this is truly for the community, because a lot of the community doesn't know the answer to this question. Who was the Kansas City Chiefs mascot before Kansas City Wolf, before KC Wolf?
That would be Warpaint.
Yes. And Warpaint was a pinto horse that roamed the Chiefs sidelines for, 40 years. Well, I would say 40, about 20, 30 years. And, was really a staple, because that was one of the first mascots for any team in the NFL. And we had a horse riding up and down the field. Every time we scored a touchdown, that horse would take off down the field, take off back, and that was kind of the thing of our mascot. What do you like, KC Wolf better? Would you like to see Warpaint come back?
I don't see why we couldn't have both.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually really like to see Warpaint come back.
Me too.
He just brings a different energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think KC Wolf is much more kid-friendly.
Yes.
and it was a little bit more expressive, but at war paint, I mean, that just brings back an entirely different energy into the stadium that I would love to see come back.
Ooh, and you're not lying there. I could only imagine at Arrowhead Stadium seeing war paint with that beautiful dressed Indian, on the back, running up and down the field. That almost takes you back to, Municipal Stadium in Kansas City when we first came up from Dallas. And yeah, there's quite tradition there. And, to use a real life mascot, is almost unheard of in professional sports. College, there's a lot of tradition in college. So, you see those mascots stick around for a while. Me personally, I'm with you. I'd love to see war paint come back and, tread that path up and down the sidelines again. So, continuing with the no-look pass. All right, Chris, I want you to take off. What's your no-look pass to me today?
All right, this one's going to be purely opinionated, but I really do want to hear your take on this one. So, which former Chiefs coordinator would you want to be the next head coach for the Chiefs?
Ooh, boy, that's a really, really, really good question. And this is at any time period?
Yeah, any time period. Because, especially, I'm just looking out for myself. Back in the 90s, we had so many big names who were coordinators or assistant coaches at KC that went on to win Super Bowls.
Yes, and so I have two names that I'm going to throw out here because I like that question, Chris, because you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a handful of coaches in the early to mid 90s that were on the Chiefs coaching staff that you said moved on to win Super Bowls as head coaches with other teams, and they're huge names that really made their start under Marty Schottenheimer. So I have two of them that I would love to see, become the Chiefs coach in that era. Say Marty steps down in the mid 90s and we need a head coach. I personally am going with Tony Dungy, and I'm also going with Bill Cowher.
Man, those are the exact same names that I had in my head.
Well, take off on both of them since we both really had the same idea. And, look, there are some other really good coaches underneath them, too. I really have to do some digging. But those two, set the tone for the 2000s for football. So take off on both of them since they're your picks, too. Why would you pick them?
Man, so going with Cowher, the earliest that I can remember, he was working out Derek Thomas prior to us drafting Derek Thomas. And he would give him drill after drill after drill. And he was amazed that Derek Thomas was not getting tired. And just knowing that the energy that Cowher brought, as well as what he learned in Kansas City underneath Marty, and then you see what he then transformed the Pittsburgh Steelers into. And, having won 2 Super Bowls, I want to say going to 4. He even brought in Cordell Stewart.
Yes.
The original Slash, the original Michael Vick before Michael Vick even existed.
Yep.
And Cowher had such a mind for defense, so he was always a defensive coach, but he also had a mind for offense.
He did too. He did. He was a genius on both sides of the ball. I'm with you on that one. He was labeled a defensive coach, but had a brilliant offensive mind. I wouldn't say that his offensive mind was as good as his defensive, but you're right. Continue with that because he really honed in on both sides of the ball. And
in the 90s and early 2000s, that was the Chiefs' strength, was our defense.
Yes.
And kind of going with your scenario of Marty stepping back mid-90s, just imagine what Cowher could have done with Derek Thomas in the 90s to 2000 range, and surrounding him with more talent, and maybe even coming up with a better scheme to, get Derek to 25 sacks in the season.
right? Or maybe something as simply keep Gannon instead of Gerback.
Oh man, yep. That was one of those franchise mistakes that I was definitely in the top of my like top three.
Yes.
But then also like putting together an offense that would be a little bit more dynamic than Marty ball, where it's just run all the time. But also looking at Cowher, he had that power back mentality where you pound it, but then you have to have a quarterback who can sling it.
Yes, and he had the Jerome Bettis, he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you put Bus in the back of any backfield, man, and that changes the running game entirely.
Honestly, that opens up the offense entirely, because you take away the speed of Christian Okoye, and then you think of Jerome Bettis. Jerome Bettis was almost like Okoye 2. Or Okoye 2.0, not as big, not as tall, not as strong, but he was a big-bodied, high engine, legs bigger around than your waist type of guy. And so he was a fear out of the backfield no matter what, when, where, and how. And that was Bill Cowher's biggest weapon in my mind, was Jerome Bettis.
Yeah.
So we... Oh, go ahead.
Well, so just kind of taking it over to the other coach that you mentioned with Tony Dungy.
Mm-hmm.
Dungy was another defensive-minded coach, but Dungy was very much a player's coach, where he was able to connect with his players. And he wasn't all about that intensity that Cowher brought,
mm-hmm.
but he got you or got players to perform at their best without that intensity, just because the players loved playing for him.
Yes. He had a demeanor about him, a calm, cool, and collective demeanor, a very, very, very intelligent man that would ultimately end up being a... what did Barack Obama hire him as? He was like a presidential... I'm not really sure what the right word for it was. He was... He was a brains and a cabinet that Barack Obama made, and he brought some famous people in to have an outside influence and to have another thought as to the direction of the states. And that's what Tony Dungy's role was, and that's really what Barack Obama did. He was an advisor. He was a presidential advisor to Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's also an advisor for the NFL as well.
Yeah.
Anytime that they have a troubled player, or they basically just send him to Tony Dungy, and Dungy kind of works his magic and will advise the NFL as to whether or not the player has turned the corner or if they still have some more work to do.
And, I really think that I would have loved to see Tony Dungy, even over Bill Cowher, be the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs as a successor of Marty Schottenheimer. And I honestly think that if Marty would have stepped away a few years sooner than he did, we would have been looking at one of them as a head coach. But look, let's be honest, Marty Schottenheimer was a lock-in in Kansas City. We never wanted to see that man walk. So it didn't matter. Look, we could have brought in, the president of the United States. And because we had Marty Schottenheimer, the president was going to walk and go coach another team.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why is at the time prior to Marty, we had such a, and we kind of touched on this earlier, such a hard time finding winning seasons that when we brought in Marty, we started winning again, and we didn't want to let that go. And had we pushed him out in some way, shape, or form, hoping for greener pastures, we weren't guaranteed of that. We were really worried about going back to our losing ways.
Right.
And I think that's what kind of ultimately led to Marty sticking around in KC as long as he was able to.
And honestly, look, I don't knock Kansas City for keeping Marty around as long as he did. I hated to see him step down when he did. But it was one of those things. At that time, I was still a kid. I was still in high school, and it hit me a lot harder than it does as an adult, because I was so these football players and these coaches, they were idols of mine, and I'm sure that you understand that, and a lot of fans that are listening, like, it broke your heart to see the man leave. But now then you look back on it and you see all the successors that he had underneath of him, you almost just look at the opportunity that we missed instead of, the memories that we have.
No, absolutely.
So that is our No Look Pass segment, brought to you by Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead Update. We're gonna move on and switch gears here to our next segment and our last segment of the show today. We're in week 6 of the season preview for the upcoming season, the Kansas City Chiefs, and this week we have the Houston Texans at Arrowhead Stadium. Chris, take off on the Houston Texans. Let us know, what do you look at with the Houston Texans in Week 6 coming into Arrowhead Stadium with their depth and their front office? Is this a team that can legitimately beat Kansas City in Week 6 at Arrowhead?
I wouldn't necessarily say that they can legitimately beat us. They're definitely going to need some help to beat us. Mm-hmm. But coming off of the Indianapolis Colts game, with the Colts and their wide receiver depth and their affinity to pass the ball, that's going to really help to set us up to play against this Houston Texans team.
Yes.
Because while we do have a Lamar Miller and hopefully a Dante Foreman at running back, their offense runs through the air much like ours and much like the Colts. And if we can shut down and or even control the Colts passing game, the Texans won't be much of a match for us. If we have problems with the Colts, then the Texans could pose a problem.
Oh, I like the way you put that.
And the thing is I would even say that the Texans passing game is a more consistent threat than the Colts.
As long as DeAndre Hopkins can stay healthy.
Yeah, if DeAndre Hopkins is healthy, if Hopkins and Fuller both come back 100% healthy, mm-hmm. they're probably one of the best, if not the best, wide receiving tandems in the league.
I agree. And the Houston Texans have really had a problem putting it all together, though. That's one thing I've noticed throughout their entire franchise, no matter what quarterback, no matter what receiver, defense they have. And they always seem to have, a quarterback, a receiver, and some type of defense. But they can never put it together.
Yeah. And I don't think that this year is going to be the year that they do it. Mm-hmm. They certainly have pieces on both sides of the ball that are going to really make them competitive.
Right.
I mean, any team that you put DeAndre Hopkins on is automatically going to be a contender.
Yes, and
that guy is such a warrior.
He really is. And then look, you put Jordan Akins as their tight end there too. I really want us to look out for him. I feel like Akins is going to open up the door for Hopkins. He's going to be able to stretch the field. I feel like they have a good, solid tight end there.
No, absolutely. And they're probably about where the Chiefs were back with Alex Smith in about year 3, year 4 under Alex Smith, mm-hmm. where we've got the pieces and it's just a matter of getting comfortable with them and how do we utilize these correctly and hopefully O'Brien will do this of spreading their offense to create the mismatches.
Right.
And so they're developing.
Yes.
Their biggest weakness on offense has to be their offensive line.
Absolutely, hands down. That might be the biggest defense on their biggest weakness on their entire team.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you put Deshaun Watson behind almost any other offensive line, I mean, his stats balloon by a good 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns.
I could see that. He's running around for his life back there.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, it's like you look at his rookie year, he was doing tremendous.
Yes.
Up until he hurt his leg.
Yep. And that wasn't his fault at all. That's a direct reflection of, like you're saying, not having an offensive line.
Yeah.
And so,
And
go ahead.
I haven't seen them do enough to really solidify that offensive line. I know that they ended up taking a tackle in the draft, but it wasn't enough for me. I needed to see them do more to make them more competitive.
And I completely agree with you. And look, we're talking about Deshaun Watson, a quarterback who at most in Chiefs Kingdom believed that he was going to be wearing a Kansas City Chiefs jersey. Now, I'm sure everybody like I am is thrilled about what we got compared to what we could have gotten Deshaun Watson. And don't get me wrong, he still would have been a franchise quarterback, but he's no Patrick Mahomes. And so I'm happy that we got Mahomes and we kind of left Watson there for Houston to pick up. He's a good fit there with DeAndre Hopkins and that Jordan Akins. He's really going to do good. J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, Tashawn Gibson is Sean's strong safety. They do have some pieces. The Texans are a well-rounded team, like you're saying. But just like the Week 5 matchup, like you were saying, with the Colts, the Texans just don't match up across the board with the Kansas City Chiefs in any aspect. I look for the Texans to be slightly better than last season, but fall to the experience of the Colts in their own division. So, like you're saying, if we get past the Colts, we beat the comeback player of the year and Andrew Luck. The next week, it's almost a mirror reflection with these teams. You're really right about these teams are so close competitively, the Colts and the Texans. We're really looking at two mirror teams back to back. So with that being said, I look for the Chiefs at home to put up more points than me and you had predicted against the Colts. My prediction for this game is the Chiefs 49 and the Texans 21. What is your take and your prediction as far as the score and the outcome of this game, a Week 6 game that could mean more than we really think it could at the end of the season?
I really think that our offense kind of goes off on these guys. I'm going to give them another touchdown more than you did. I'd say that these guys could probably put up about 56 points against this Houston Texans defense. That while they do have a strong safety and a cornerback that I really do respect, and then two absolute bookends that threaten our quarterback and the tackles at any given time, I don't think that they have enough pieces to shut down our offense. And I think that we're able to stop and turn over the ball from the Texans a little bit more and put the ball in Mahomes' hands to allow us to really run up the score against these guys. I'm going to go 56-14.
Nice. I like that. And I really couldn't agree with you more about what you were just saying. Obviously, our scores are around the same, but you look at an Alex Smith-led Kansas City Chiefs that would take it to the Texans on any given Sunday. Alex Smith would pick apart that defense. If Alex Smith can pick that defense apart, watch and wait what Patrick Mahomes can do with the same core. Because on that defense, I mean, it's pretty much the same core guys that they had when Alex Smith, and I'm talking J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, obviously those two are staples in that defense and, two of the biggest names in the NFL. And we have ran all over both of them their entire careers at Houston, and I'm with you. I don't see it changing. So, Chris, do you have anything to add to today's show before we go ahead and turn the lights out and call it quits for the day?
Just one other thing I want to touch on with the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really hoping that we get to see J.J. Watt in this game, a healthy J.J. Watt. The last two times that we've played the Texans, he's ended up leaving due to injury. And in both of those games, we ended up winning. But beating the Texans without their obviously their best player, I won't say it's an empty victory, but it's definitely a shallower victory. I want to see J.J. Watt on the field the entire time and for us to be able to still take it to them. Yeah,
that'd be a huge exclamation point on whether the Chiefs are true contenders to win the Super Bowl if you can, put up huge numbers against Clowney and a healthy J.J. Watt. A healthy J.J. Watt.
And facing J.J. Watt, I think, is going to really help Eric Fisher for the rest of the season, because going in deep into the season, I mean, we have to face really good pass rushers.
Yes.
But he won't have to face a whole lot of strength and power defensive ends like J.J. Watt. And I think being able to shut down or control J.J. Watt is going to do nothing but help out the confidence of Eric Fisher moving forward.
Especially if we have to face a team like St. Louis in the Super Bowl with Aaron Donald.
No, absolutely.
And that could not be a better point, Chris. If we can get a healthy J.J. Watt playing against us, and Eric Fisher can shut him down, that's going to be a huge indication. Look, I really feel like Eric Fisher did a really good job against Donald last season. I mean, because we got to the Rams quarterback essentially way more than the Rams got to Mahomes. Yeah,
and I think Donald only got to Mahomes once, I believe. Maybe a second time. But for the majority of the game, Donald didn't really affect us. Our offensive line was able to truly control him and their pass rush.
Yes. And I believe he did get a sack or two with a forced fumble on Patrick Mahomes. I believe that was one key play that Donald got against us. But I mean, if that's all the man is doing to you when you're putting up a combined, 115 points, and you only let that man get to your quarterback once, hey, look, I'm a huge advocate of Eric Fisher, but I'm also with you on this one. I want to see him against a top-tier competitor. I want to see it. And the Chiefs' schedule is defense heavy. I want Arrowhead to know that. I want Chiefs King to know our schedule is defense heavy, so he's going to get tested. Mahomes is going to get tested more than he has in his entire career. Well, obviously, he's been short-lived, but he's going to get tested more so this season than last. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, man, it's always good talking football with you. I'm glad we're getting this done early today. I'm sure both of us have some things to do, but that is our episode for today. Chris, thanks for coming on, bud.
Sure thing, man. Anytime, man.
Awesome. Well, Chiefs Kingdom, you all have a wonderful day. It is hump day. And so there's just 2 more days to the work week. We can get into the weekend and get some relaxation. And so pound it away. It's grind time, Kansas City. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And we will speak with you soon. From the Kansas City Sports Update Studios, welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Join Chris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, CastBox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead Update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom.